Hi, I just wanted to take a moment and comment on a recent video that's been, well, it's been getting quite a bit of traffic on YouTube lately. It was first published by Big Think, which is a website offering big ideas from fields outside your own. They say that you can apply towards the questions and challenges of your own life. Now, I think this is a laudable idea. I like the concept of not just throwing things out there on the internet, but I have a problem with one of their videos. It's a very popular video featuring Bill Nye, who is a popular television personality. Had a show running for several years called Bill Nye the Science Guy, where he instructed our children on things of science. And he's looked up to, because of this, in many circles, as an authority. And one of the things I wanted to talk about was some of the claims he specifically made in this short video that I find a little bit problematic.
Denial of evolution is unique to the United States. I mean, we are the world's most advanced technological, so I mean, you could say Japan, but generally the United States is where most of the innovation still happens. When you have a portion of the population that doesn't believe in that, it holds everybody back, really.
Okay, claim number one. Not believing in evolution holds everybody back. Well, before we even get into this issue, I first have to ask Mr. Nye, what do you mean when you say evolution? Evolution is an interesting word. You see, it's used in many different ways, from things change all the way to the idea of all life stemming from a single organism that came into existence at some hundreds of millions of years in the past. But even when we're talking about evolution as adaptive towards life, it's really not a monolithic entity. It's not like Newton's laws or something like that, where you can know that everybody's kind of talking about the same thing. Evolution means many different things to many different people. You have ideas of punctuated equilibria. You have steady state theories. You have a lot of different explanations for evolution and what evolution means. And I don't quite know what Mr. Nye is talking about when he just merely says evolution. I mean, do I believe that things change over time? Of course I do. I don't hold that to be any problem at all. Do I believe that bacteria can evolve a resistance to an antibiotic or a vaccine? Sure I can. I don't see that as antithetical to my Christian worldview. Do I believe that all breeds of dogs descended from a common species? Yeah, I don't have a problem with that either. But how does that then say I'm an evolution denier? You know, was there intelligence used in breeding dogs? Just because, again, they descended from a common ancestor doesn't mean that maybe human involvement and intelligence wasn't part of that process. So when you say evolution, I'm kind of confused as to specifically what you mean. Now, claim two.
Evolution is the fundamental idea in all of life science, in all of biology. Your world just becomes fantastically complicated when you don't believe in evolution.
Let's assume that Mr. Nye means evolution as an unguided process, a mindless process that through mere chance of genetic mutation as well as natural selection, we see all of the diversity of life before us from a single organism, what is known as the tree of life, or what I call, quoting Richard Dawkins, the blind watchmaker hypothesis. I think the blind watchmaker hypothesis actually has many more difficult issues than holding to a creation event. For example, how did life begin? You know, if you're talking about the development of life, then you also have to ask, what about the origin of life? It seems to me that if there's a creator that originated life, then it's more plausible to believe that that creator would continue to sustain life. We have problems, like I said, of consciousness. How does consciousness arise from unconscious material? How do we get the idea of a mind? How do we get the idea of feelings? How do we get the idea of abstract concepts where we can think about what the future means? The whole concept of future is something foreign to everyone else in the animal kingdom. Only human beings are able to contemplate their future in a significant way. Sure, you have insects and others, squirrels will store up nuts for the winter, but they do that merely by instinct, not because they have an abstract understanding of the future. Also, what models are offered to show that new information is being placed into the DNA, that develop, say, the new breathing apparatus for a whale who supposedly evolved from a land animal? Where did the information come from in that DNA? Now you could say, well, it's mutations, it's merely mutations. Well, those are pretty significant mutations. They would have to, in a very short amount of time, relatively speaking, provide an awful lot of new information. It's kind of like you have one monkey typing on a typewriter and he types out Shakespeare's sonnets the very first time he tries. They're just really significant problems within evolution. Okay, the last thing I want to point out, and this is probably the impetus for this video, was the last claim that Bill Nye made.
And I say to the grown-ups, if you want to deny evolution and live in your world that's completely inconsistent with everything we observe in the universe, that's fine. But don't make your kids do it, because we need them. We need scientifically literate voters and taxpayers for the future. We need people that can, we need engineers that can build stuff, solve problems.
Okay, so there's Bill's claim. A couple of questions even on this. First of all, how does my belief or disbelief in the blind watchmaker model, how does that make me a bad bridge builder? How does that make me a bad architect? How does that make me a bad medical doctor? I know many medical doctors who are very fine in their craft, who hold to creation. That doesn't make you a bad medical doctor. See, the practice of medicine is not reliant upon believing in evolution. The practice of medicine is reliant upon understanding the systems and how they work. Now, contrary to Mr. Nye's claims, I think Francis Crick actually contradicts what he says. Francis Crick, the co-discoverer of DNA, Nobel laureate, wrote in a book, What Mad Pursuit, he writes, quote, biologists must constantly keep in mind that what they see was not designed but rather evolved. Now he goes on and says, it might be thought that evolutionary arguments would play a large part in guiding biological research. But this is far from the case. It is difficult enough to study what is happening now. To try and figure out exactly what happened in evolution is even more difficult. The evolutionary argument can be usefully used as hints to suggest possible lines of research, but it is highly dangerous to trust them too much. It is too easy to make mistaken inferences unless the process involved is already very well understood. Close quote. That's Francis Crick. He's saying that biology can't rely on evolution because evolution is, there's too many unknowns. It's too fuzzy. He says, quote, it's highly dangerous to trust them too much. No, you don't need to rely on evolution in biological research, as Crick says. One last thing that I think we need to mention that hasn't been talked about yet is there are other attributes that people need to develop that evolution can't answer as well. Let's talk about morality, for example. Morality is hugely important in our society. It's probably more important than knowing whether you believe in evolution or not. We don't necessarily need our accountant to be an evolutionist. We definitely need our accountants to be moral. Our businessmen need to be moral in their decision makings, and so do our scientists who are presenting results from their experiments. So morality is a key component in dealing with this issue. I remember we take kids on trips up to UC Berkeley, and I had a couple of high school girls who had faced off against some microbiology students. Now the microbiology college kids knew evolution, they knew the theories, but they had a really hard time defining what is right and what is wrong. And that's part of my point. You see, once you start eliminating God from the equation, then you have issues with competing views of morality, with a morality that isn't anchored in anything absolute, anything to which all of humanity can adhere. You basically have a society that starts to develop a morality based on whatever they themselves understand it to be. And that can be a much bigger issue. So I think when we start talking about evolution, start warning parents about things, about how kids should be not taught certain issues, I think ethics and morality and the grounding of those ethics and morality is important. Similarly, I think equality. Our United States Declaration says that all men are created equal because they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Aren't those kinds of topics equally as important, if not more important, than being able to do good science? So in all these things, I think that Mr. Nye is just a little mistaken in his view. I think that he's taken a position that really isn't as well thought out or reaching as far as it needs to in order to really talk about what it requires to make a society strong and able to cope with the next generation. Thank you.